Good morning, horrible people. Horrible human beings, a subsidiary of Handsome Dan's Dirtbag Deli, proud to present to you today's extra special episode, staying with the same theme that been for the last few days, chess and the analogy that it makes towards life and checkmates. So today, today's very special episode is going to be Tupac, Two Quarters in the Dark Night. And we're going to get in depth with a special type of checkmate. As you know, you win the game when you checkmate the king. Putting the king under attack is check, and when the king is under attack and can't move or escape to another space without being attacked, that's known as checkmate. Game over, the king falls down. So today's episode deals with the piece, the knight. The knights are different from every other part on the chessboard because they don't move linearly, meaning they don't move just up or down or attack left or right or diagonal. The knights actually can move around places. They move in an L position. You heard people say the knights move in an L. That means they move two spaces up and one across, or two spaces down and one to the left or right, which makes the L. But in doing so, they're able to move through pieces. Any other piece, including the queen, has to deal with whatever's in their line of vision, meaning that if you can block them, then they got to deal with that. So they need to take out a piece so they can get to whatever's behind there or whatever. But due to the knights attack specific squares exactly. I kind of like call them hitmen. So today's checkmate is called the smothered mate, which is really really interesting. When the knight, imagine you got a guy who is about to testify on the mob. So the FBI got him holed up in a building. The whole perimeter of the building, the front, the back, the sides, are all covered by Navy SEALs and whatever, Green Berets, Goggins, whoever. But the whole perimeter, how would you go about getting in there to take the witness out? Because you can't go from the front, you can't go from the back, you can't come from the sides, but possibly you'll go through the top and drop right through the ceiling to get them, and ignoring any of the obstructions to getting in through the perimeter. And that's essentially what the knights do. They attack. So they can skip through pieces just to get to a specific square. Smothered mate deals with when the king is surrounded by his own people, but i.e. he's smothered, but he's also trapped. And he can't move anywhere because he's insulated by his pieces. This was really interesting when I began to think, because it struck me in two ways of how sometimes in life when you find yourself, you can't go the traditional route, and the checkmate is not always a person. Sometimes it's a destination or a position of success or position of power or whatever your aim is. But you, much like the knight, can't move for whatever reason in the traditional linear front way. So you got to do something non-traditional. And nobody who I thought exemplified this more than 50 Cent. When 50 Cent first came out, he had gotten signed, but then he got dropped because he got caught up in he had some neighborhood beef. Then he ended up getting banged 9 times, and you know the whole story. But the worst part about it was he was beefing with somebody who at that time, Ja Rule, arguably was the most popular artist. I mean, he had hits on it didn't get no more A-list than that. And this guy, 50, was just somebody. Nobody really knew him. So aside from all of the other calamitous things going on, he wasn't able to market himself how he wanted to, because professionally all the industry roles was locked. He was getting blackballed. So what he had to do was, since he couldn't move like that, he had to use the way he could move as power and move non-traditionally and begin to make himself, because the one thing he could do that the industry couldn't was he had nothing to lose, so he could make himself hot from the streets, and the streets dictate the industry, not the other way around, and they won't be denied, and nobody who's locked into the industry can really go back down to the streets because it's too far. So using that, he made himself hot, and he was able to jump past getting written up in the Source and the Vibe, and having journalists give him good reviews, and he set up his own shows. He didn't get to do headlining shows, but he set up and made his own machine so that he was able to jump past what Ja Rule and Murder Inc. were trying to do and block him. Like I was saying, they was blocking the perimeter of success in the industry, and he created his own momentum, and 50 came through the top, came right from the top, landed on the spot he needed to. That's when Eminem had got with the movement, signed him to Shady, and then it was done from that moment. But he had to get himself hot to get from there. So if you look at Ja Rule as being the king, he was able to checkmate the king by, the king was insulated by his money and his stature and where he was in the industry, insulated where he couldn't be touched, or so he thought. But moving in a non-traditional way, he bypassed all the obstructions and was able to touch him succinctly, got him out of there, as history would tell. But on the flip side of that, sometimes our pieces, our own pieces that are blocking us in, can be our own choices we made, and not just one choice, but a list of choices. And after a while, we blocked in by all of our choices we made. And there's no other situation that made me see that, because a perfect smothered mate, the inverse of the first example, would be Tupac. And I thought about Tupac's death. That last picture that happened a few minutes or what have you before Tupac was shot and killed in Vegas, all the way back then, that look in his eyes really tell a lot. It tells it's haunting, especially when you know what's about to occur and maybe in the next 5 to 6 minutes. But that, in that situation, Tupac had smothered, he was surrounded by death row and by the death row people, but more poignantly, he was surrounded figuratively by his choices. And maybe the last choice that he made that night boxed him in, and that look in his eyes was equivalent to him being aware, I'm boxed in. I boxed my own self in with my actions, my decisions, choices, and as history would tell, he ended up getting checkmated and he was trapped. And so that's the smothered mate, when you're surrounded by your own people and your own doings, and you actually are trapped. You've trapped yourself. You leave yourself nowhere to go, nowhere to escape. Only thing you can do is be mated. And so that's why generally, and it's different variations to that. Me personally, I always was somebody who liked to use the rooks to do my dirty work like that, but essentially doing the same thing when a person can't move. When you can't move, trap and lock the whole block down. But that's today's episode: the smothered mate, horrible human beings, Tupac, 2 quarters, and the Dark Knight. You guys be well. Und Schleißen. Keep it moving.